Hello and welcome to this week's lecture on dashboards and interactive analytics. Earlier on in the semester, when we were talking, way back I think it would have been in week 2, about what is the purpose of a visualization. And back then we were talking primarily about infographics, and we were talking about whether they were exploratory or explanatory. And infographics were primarily explanatory. They had a story to tell. They didn't serve the purpose of letting someone figure something out. Well, interactive analytics are at the opposite end of that spectrum. They are an exploratory system. They exist so that someone who doesn't fully understand something can dig through the data until they do. To do that, they present a very complicated user interface which gives people the agency that they need to explore the portions of the data that are most relevant to them. Can I give you an example from our YouTube channel? This is the analytics page of the Designing with AI YouTube channel that we've been using to host these videos, and you can see some really interesting things from diving into the data in this detail. For example, that big purple spike around the 20th of April was students in my design programming class cramming for the exam at the last minute. There's a blue spike around the 22nd of March, which is people cramming for the assignment for this subject. Unfortunately, the story that I can pull away from this data is, just like every other human being, students are primarily motivated by things that will impact them substantially. In this case, marks. If you want to get someone to watch a video, make it necessary for their assignment. That's a bit of a depressing story for someone who likes to enrich lives, but it is the story we're pulling out of that particular interactive analytic. But going back to that notion of whether a data visualization is exploratory or explanatory, there exists a category in the middle that I think is quite interesting to explore in this lecture, and will, based on that idea of what gets people motivated, and will impact your final assignment. And that's the information dashboard. A dashboard is an explanatory visualization. Dashboards exist to answer specific questions at a very high level. They are often used by management and executives within an organization to check up on the performance metrics that matter to them. They have worked with visualization designers and engineers in advance to figure out what are the most important things, act as a health check or a performance indicator for their organization, and you give those precedence. A dashboard, just like the dashboard of your car, is designed to be readable at a glance. You don't want to be spending half an hour looking at your odometer to figure out the exact details of when you go further. You need to be looking back at the road. A dashboard is something that you glance at. But why dashboards are interesting from this perspective is because they give you the capability to learn more should you need to. But before I go into the details of that, let's look at a couple of examples of dashboards. Here's one that I use. This is the embedded app for the Pebble smartwatch, which is the pinnacle of 2013 technology, that lets you see how far you have walked on each day and lets you see how well you have slept on each day. Unfortunately, I have to say this is a pretty normal night's sleep for someone who has 2 small children. You can see I got to bed about 10:50 and then didn't sleep between the hours of 1 and 3 a.m. for a total of 5.25 hours sleep. So that's fun. Kids, everybody, they're the best. You can also see that they're trying to surface the days in which I walk the most up in the top half there. On Sunday, we're obviously out doing something and walking around a lot more than usual. On Friday, I think I worked from home and didn't leave the apartment. So you can see trends like this, but what you can't do is dig down into the reasons for any of that. This dashboard is for at-a-glance visibility only. There's even an example of this from our previous lectures. This was, I think, an example I used in week 3 or so. This is for Clipsal, which lets you monitor any solar panels or batteries that you've got installed at your house. This shows some dashboardy elements in things like that first and second screenshot, which just give you a top-line view. The above-the-fold stuff, what's the most important part that you need to know right now? How much money have I saved towards paying off my panels? And then what is my history is something that you can dig into. That's the third panel, only if you have more time to explore. And the fourth panel about usage over time is something that you would only dig into if you are interested in getting the details. So key to designing a dashboard is this principle of drilling down. That term has become fairly popular in the last couple of years, and I've got to admit, I don't really like it as a term to describe what's going on here. One, very phallic, not necessary, trying to divest ourselves as a society from phallic terms for things. But secondly, I don't think you're actually drilling down into the data. Why do you drill holes? Because you want to screw things tight. You want things to not move anymore. You drill holes in order to make things stop. Unless they mean drilling in like an Antarctic ice core sense, but that's not exactly the first thing that people would think. The point is, it's a very confused metaphor. What it's really called is progressive reveal or progressive disclosure. That's the interface design term, the design pattern that governs this idea of showing people a little to begin with, but giving them opportunities on how to find more. So I showed you some of the examples of that from the Clipsal Viz before, but here's another example that I think you might find familiar. This is the top level part, the dashboard part of that YouTube analytics page, just showing us the 3 metrics of interest for most channel owners. Well, how many views did you get in the last 90 days? How many 1,000 hours of watch time? And how many subscribers have you added in that period? Then you can see kind of like the views over time, or if you click on those other things, you can see watch time over time, etc. This is the top level interface, but look how many interface objects allow you to dig down further. You can see the see more over here. You can click on that to get into details about views. You can see the live count of subscribers with this here. You can dig into views over time, like when are you getting your views and on what videos here. You've got tabs up here that let you look at different perspectives on this. You can adjust the time here. There's even an advanced mode up here. This entire interface is trying to get you to engage with it more. And there are many, many millions of charts. I can see what time of day you tend to watch these videos. I can see how many minutes in you tend to close. I think that'd be about now on average. Were you thinking of closing the video? Google knows. Google knows when you close the video, and Google tells me. Enough goofing, back to that principle of progressive disclosure. There's plenty of ways to do this, and let's dive down into user interface layer for a second and talk about what some of those look like. Here's some examples from Material Design, Google's design language. So all of these are sort of accordion or expandable interface elements. So you can see you can click on one of the triangles over on the right, or actually probably click anywhere on the panel and it will expand out. And then once it expands out, you might have the capacity to edit something and then save. So this would be more like an editable data interface model rather than a visualization model. But the same sort of principles apply if you want to go and view the details about that thing. Here's an animated version of that just so that you can see what's going on. This allows you to dive into the specifics of a thing in a way that doesn't obscure the others. There are many, many interface paradigms for this. There's also the issue of what goes into an on-screen control and what goes into a menu. You have loads of choice on how to do your interaction model. You can have a hamburger menu, or a kebab menu, a meatball menu. A lot of vegetarian options there, unfortunately. This isn't a user interface course, so I'm going to touch on these things lightly and suggest that you go and dive into them into more detail afterwards. But in going back to the basics on interface design for visualizations, we can start to get at, I think, the really most fascinating part of the third assignment for this course, which is that you have the opportunity now to go beyond charts, to go beyond static charts, to go beyond just presenting our story one way, and to integrate some exploratory capacity into your final assignments should you feel that that is a good angle for your story, and should you be able to have the technical chops to pull it off. It is not required. You can tell a great story using the simple charts that we've learned, but I would encourage students to go down the interactive analytics route. Consider having some elements of your story, of the article that you put together for assignment 3, having something more of an interactive web app vibe to them. Not necessarily a dashboard, because readers of this thing are probably not going to be checking back in to get more updates in real time, but an interactive piece that lets people decide for themselves. Some of the most effective pieces of data journalism that I've seen show people the top line and then let them go learn more. Probably the best example of that is Hans Rosling's gapminder.org, which allows you to dig into what is the actual gap between the rich and poor countries, and what does that really look like, because most people's ideas, first world, second world, third world, are about 40 years out of date at this point. So I'd encourage people to try to find a balance between their skills as an interaction designer and the skills they're picking up as a data visualization designer, and look for something interactive and unique in the middle. It might be a great way to show off those chops for the third assignment. But what it really comes down to when you're designing these kinds of interactive visualizations is very much the same questions that people have for any other user interface. This is basic interaction design stuff, basic human-computer interaction. What will the goals of the users be? So what goals will the users of this visualization have? Are there different groups of users with different goals? How long will they spend engaging with it? How much time do I have to tell them my story? And this one is the critical part of visualization interfaces, because the constraint is how much screen they have. How can I use my screen real estate most effectively, given the things that I need to do, the data that I have, and the user's goals? If you manage to do that, you'll be able to put together amazing interactive analytics, be they dashboards or be they deep dives or drill downs, if you really want to call them that. So I hope that lets you thread the needle a little bit between some of the work that you've done as an interaction designer in past subjects and some of the work that we're looking to do for this one. And I will see you in class next week.